Beneath the rubble of wars long ended, there are places where the air still smells of oil and fear. Locked rooms beneath forgotten cities, crates sealed before you were born, papers burned in silence before daylight could touch them. These are not stories written for history books. They are shadows, stitched together from whispers, half-truths, and things powerful men swore would never be spoken aloud. In the final days of April 1945, elements of the British 11th Armoured Division advanced eastward through Lower Saxony, pushing toward Lübeck to cut off retreating German forces. On the evening of April 27th, reconnaissance units operating near the Harz foothills reported a partially collapsed rail spur branching from an abandoned freight line. The track terminated at a reinforced concrete tunnel portal set into the hillside, its rusted gates welded shut and the surrounding area wired with a defensive pattern of explosives. Captured Wehrmacht maps in the possession of the division's intelligence section identified the location as Schattenlager 12. The term, literally, Shadow Depot, appeared in only 2 other documents found in the field, both heavily abbreviated maintenance logs bearing Luftwaffe insignia and the designation EHK, believed to indicate Erprobunktial construction, or experimental construction hall. No other Allied intelligence files mentioned the site. Following orders from Brigade HQ, Royal Engineers from 612 Field Squadron were brought in to defuse the charges. Sappers reported that the detonation pattern was designed to collapse both the entrance and the first 50 meters of the tunnel, indicating that whoever prepared it had no intention of preserving the structure. After 20 hours of careful dismantling, the gates were forced open under arc light illumination. Inside, the first chamber was filled with standard Luftwaffe supply crates, though the contents were anything but standard. Witness statements taken in May 1945 describe the discovery of wooden shipping boxes stamped with the Luftwaffe eagle and the code Gerät 1049B. Inside each crate lay precision-machined components, fuselage frames of an unfamiliar alloy, swept wing panels with unusual leading-edge profiles, and control surfaces coated in a dull graphite black material. Among them were 2 cylindrical housings containing turbine blades far smaller and more compact than any known German jet engine of the period. A fragment of a typewritten inventory list, recovered from a desk near the back of the tunnel, listed several items under the category V Muster/Hochgeschwindigkeit, V Prototype, High Speed. The final line read, Kraftquelle TYP-13, Lieferung verboten, Power Source Type 13, Delivery Prohibited. No such designation appeared in captured German technical catalogs. Within 48 hours, the depot was sealed and placed under guard. On May 2nd, a convoy of Bedford trucks escorted by armed personnel from the British First Corps departed the site under cover of darkness. Their stated destination was an RAF Technical Evaluation Unit in Farnborough. However, surviving road logs from that week show no record of the vehicles arriving there. Declassified correspondence between SHAEF technical liaison officers and the United States Army Air Forces suggests that American intelligence operatives, possibly attached to the Air Technical Intelligence Division, had intervened. One memo, dated May 6, 1945, and signed by a Lieutenant Colonel Raymond H. Cutler, requested exclusive custody of Schattenlager 12's recovered materials for urgent examination under Project Paperclip objectives. The British signature block on the same document is blank. Post-war inquiries into the whereabouts of the Schattenlager 12 artifacts have produced only contradictions. A 1951 parliamentary question regarding missing wartime material was met with the statement that all relevant equipment recovered in April, May 1945 from Lower Saxony has been either scrapped or incorporated into research projects of no strategic significance. Yet U.S. Air Force archival requests from the same period contain multiple references to German-derived aeronautical configurations tested at an undisclosed Nevada installation in 1946. In 1984, an unredacted field report from a former member of 612 Field Squadron surfaced in a Veterans Association newsletter. The writer, Sergeant Harold McKinnon, claimed that shortly before the crates were removed, he had been ordered to weld shut a second, narrower tunnel entrance discovered behind a false wall at the rear of the main chamber. According to McKinnon, this secondary passage contained 3 tarpaulin-covered airframes unlike anything he had seen, sleek, angular, and seemingly intact. He was told to forget the sighting. A Freedom of Information request to the UK Ministry of Defence in 1999 yielded 17 pages of heavily redacted papers. Only one phrase survived without black ink: continuing liaison with USAF on Schattenlager materials to remain off public record until further directive. The directive number was missing. The location itself has changed beyond recognition. The spur line was dismantled in the early 1950s, and the hillside was quarried for aggregate, erasing the tunnel entrance entirely. Satellite imagery from the late 1970s shows only a depression in the terrain where the portal once stood. Local oral history still recalls the night the army came, and how trucks rolled out in silence toward the Autobahn, never to return. Whether Schattenlager 12 was an experimental assembly plant, a storage point for a late-war jet project, or something far more advanced remains unknown. The last confirmed mention in surviving Allied records is dated May 14, 1945, 2 days after Germany's unconditional surrender, marking the official closure of the site. The notation beside it is brief: disposition complete to foreign custody. In February 1946, as the ruins of Warsaw lay under a crust of ice and Soviet banners, a covert NKVD directive was issued from Lubyanka headquarters under the codename Operatsiya Chasovnya, Operation Chapel. The mission was not officially recorded in the Polish People's Republic archives, but fragments of related documents surfaced decades later in declassified KGB microfilm reels. The objective: recover a steel attaché case believed to contain microfilm reels from an Abwehr courier killed during the Soviet liberation of the city 16 months earlier. The target case had last been seen in September 1944, during the final days of the Warsaw Uprising. Intelligence summaries suggest the courier, Oberleutnant Friedrich Kellmann of Eiswolf-Stellung Breslau, was attempting to cross the partially destroyed Kierbeds Bridge under cover of smoke when he was fatally shot. Polish resistance fighters reportedly looted his body, mistaking the attaché for a simple officer's dispatch case. The items inside, however, were neither orders nor pay books. Soviet sources claim the microfilm contained reconnaissance data on sabotage cells operating in Allied-held France, Italian partisan networks, and, most significantly, coordinates of Alpine facilities linked to nuclear experimentation. The NKVD operation, led by Colonel Alexander Petrov, began on February 4, 1946. A small team arrived in Warsaw under the guise of civil reconstruction consultants. Their true brief came in a sealed envelope: locate the case, eliminate intermediaries, and return the contents directly to Moscow. According to a partially declassified mission ledger, Petrov's unit interrogated over 30 former members of the Armia Krajowa within a span of 6 days. Several of these individuals vanished from the city's post-war census records. One lead brought the NKVD to a half-collapsed townhouse on Swiata Krzyska Street. Beneath the charred beams, Petrov's men discovered a concealed compartment under the cellar floorboards. Inside was a cloth bundle containing 3 film canisters, but the leader's after-action note records, not original, decoys, commercially produced. Pattern consistent with Western intelligence countermeasures. It appeared the real contents had changed hands more than once since 1944. By mid-February, the search turned toward Praga district, where a black market in German war trophies flourished. A KGB archive summary from 1952, heavily redacted but retaining date stamps, describes a night raid on a warehouse near the river. Several crates of Wehrmacht field gear were seized, but no attaché. However, one of the confiscated items, a damaged Enigma rotor set, carried a shipping label from Königsberg dated October 1944. The handwriting on the manifest matched that of Oberleutnant Kellmann. On the night of February 18, 1946, witnesses reported seeing 2 Soviet GAZAA trucks leaving Praga under heavy guard, heading east along the old Lublin road. They were never logged at any checkpoint. Petrov's final mission cable to Moscow, transmitted the same night, read, "Objective secured. Routing via non-standard corridor. No further transmissions." No record exists of the attaché case or its contents arriving at Lubyanka. Instead, a classified Soviet inventory from August 1946 lists an entry, item 14/Chasovnya, status, relocated. Relocated to where is not stated. The trail ends there in official files. In 1978, a retired GRU officer speaking anonymously to a Western journalist claimed that the reels were never meant for Soviet eyes. He alleged that the courier had been double-handling for the British Special Operations Executive, and that the coordinates were part of a deception plan, fabricated Alpine research sites to divert Soviet scientific teams. This claim, however, is contradicted by a single decrypted Soviet telegram from March 1946, which refers to operational verification of German physicist relocation to northern Italy, source Chasovnya. Modern historians attempting to trace Operatsiya Chasovnya face a wall of conflicting testimonies. Polish post-war police reports mention multiple unsolved murders of former resistance members in February 1946, with victims found bound and shot at close range, killings officially attributed to bandit elements. Private letters smuggled to London by surviving AK veterans describe a Russian purge in search of the Germans' metal box. The steel attaché case has never been recovered. A single surviving photograph, found in a Polish family album in 1993, shows Kelman in uniform with the case at his feet, taken in early 1944 in Breslau. The markings on its surface match no known Abwehr-issued model. The family who owned the photograph refused interviews, citing unwanted attention from both Soviet and Western visitors in the early 1950s. To this day, no one can say with certainty what was on the missing microfilm, or who ultimately took possession of it. The NKVD's files close in 1952 with a notation, Chasovnya, archive sealed under Protocol 8. What that protocol entails remains one of the many unanswered questions in the shadowed history of post-war intelligence. On a cold morning in February 1958, French naval engineers arrived at the derelict U-boat pens of St. Nazaire, the massive concrete monoliths that had once sheltered Kriegsmarine's Atlantic wolfpacks. Officially, they were there to assess structural damage before demolishing unused sections of the port. Unofficially, a classified directive from the French Ministère d'Armes ordered the controlled flooding of Pen 3, a chamber long sealed since 1945 after rumors of a restricted lower bay reached Paris through naval intelligence. The rumors began in late 1944 when Free French divers, surveying the war-damaged harbor under Allied orders, reported an inaccessible lower level 30 meters below the waterline. They had glimpsed what appeared to be rusted steel blast doors, each bearing the Kriegsmarine Eagle and a partially obscured project name, Morgan. Allied records from the period contain no reference to any Projekt Morgensturm, but scattered fragments in German engineering archives mention a late-war initiative to develop high-frequency radar systems for U-boat wolfpacks, technology that could have disrupted Allied sonar advantage in 1946 had the war continued. Post-war Allied teams never gained access to the suspected chamber. In 1946, the French Navy declared Pen 3 structurally unsafe, citing risk of collapse. The section was walled off and excluded from civilian dockyard use. Yet internal correspondence from the early 1950s shows intermittent interest from NATO's Anti-Submarine Warfare Division, requesting site inspections under classified protocol. The 1958 operation was conducted with minimal documentation. Surviving engineering logs show that divers were deployed for only 2 hours before the order to flood was given. One diver, Lieutenant Marcel Duroc, later told a colleague, off the record, that he had touched the blast doors and found them warm to the touch despite the near-freezing seawater. Duroc claimed he also saw a line of stenciled numbers above the doorframe, December 19, 44. The significance remains unknown. 2 weeks later, the chamber was completely submerged, and all access points were sealed under 8 meters of reinforced concrete. The official explanation in dockyard maintenance reports was prevention of hazardous subsidence. No photographs of the lower chamber have ever surfaced. In the mid-1970s, NATO conducted a sonar survey of the St. Nazaire pens as part of a routine structural integrity study. The declassified summary notes hollow anomalies beneath Pen 3, but omits any technical diagrams. The raw sonar data for that survey is missing from the French naval archives. An unsigned memorandum found among NATO liaison papers states, recommend no further probing of anomaly clusters, maintain operational discretion. Independent researchers have since speculated that Projekt Morgensturm might have been more than radar research. Some suggest it could have been linked to the German Kurzwelle-Nordtungsgerät, short-wave location device, experiments, which sought to combine radar with passive sonar arrays. Others believe it was connected to rumored attempts to mount miniature nuclear reactors aboard U-boats, an idea supported only by unverified testimonies from post-war Soviet interrogations of German engineers. A 1989 interview with a retired French naval officer added another layer to the mystery. He claimed that during the Cold War, American Navy divers trained in the vicinity of St. Nazaire under the guise of NATO exercises. According to him, they were not there for training, but to verify what the Germans left. He described seeing unfamiliar equipment offloaded from a U.S. transport vessel and moved inland under military escort. The port today bears no visible trace of Pen 3's hidden chamber. Tourists walk over it unaware, the reinforced roof now part of a public promenade. Yet among naval historians and intelligence researchers, Projekt Morgensturm remains a quiet obsession, a reminder that beneath layers of concrete and water, some wartime secrets have simply been entombed rather than erased. The last official reference to the project appears in a 1959 internal French Navy budget note allocating funds for continuing studies of German-derived subsurface technologies. The notation beside the line reads only, St. Nazaire, status, indefinite containment. On the night of March 21, 1947, an unmarked Douglas C-54 Skymaster lifted off from Bremen Airfield under the designation Courier Black Two. Officially, it was logged as a diplomatic transport bound for Washington, D.C., via the Azores. Unofficially, the flight carried 6 former Reich scientists, names absent from any paperclip intake lists, and several sealed footlockers marked with U.S. Army Air Force's property tags. None of them were ever seen again. The mission's surviving documentation is sparse. The Bremen departure manifest, declassified in 1972, shows the crew as U.S. Air Transport Command personnel. Passenger fields are blank, an irregularity not explained in Air Force filing manuals of the time. The load sheet describes the cargo only as priority engineering material, foreign origin. Weather station logs from RAF Lodge's field in the Azores confirm that the Skymaster never landed for its scheduled refueling stop. Instead, radar returns from a U.S. Navy picket vessel, the USS Sandoval, recorded an unidentified aircraft at 2:14 Greenwich Mean Time flying 200 nautical miles north of its expected route. The Sandoval's logbook notes a low-level radar signature of second contact in trail, described by the duty officer as highly unusual for known Atlantic traffic. By dawn, Courier Black Two had vanished. Search and rescue patrols from Newfoundland and Bermuda found no wreckage, no oil slick, no emergency beacon signals. The incident was logged internally as a probable ditching with total loss of crew and cargo. Publicly, no press releases were issued. In the summer of 1948, a confidential memorandum from the Air Technical Intelligence Division, ATIC, surfaced during an unrelated Pentagon audit. The memo, signed by Major Ernest W. Flanders, requests secure allocation of storage and analysis facilities for incoming German aviation prototypes, items to be referenced under CB2 manifest. Handwritten across the top margin, handled via Langley channels, do not list under ATIC property. This Langley notation fueled speculation among intelligence historians that the disappearance had been staged. Declassified budget records from the Central Intelligence Agency show an unitemized expenditure of $326,000 in April 1947, roughly the week after Courier Black Two vanished. The payee field is blank. Former U.S. Air Force navigator Lieutenant John Renner claimed in a 1963 oral history interview that while stationed in Bermuda, he overheard a maintenance crew discussing a mystery C-54 that had been diverted to a remote airstrip in Newfoundland under armed guard. According to Renner, the crew said the passengers were whisked away by men in suits, and the aircraft was later ferried to the continental U.S. with no tail markings. The 6 scientists allegedly aboard remain unidentified. Cross-referencing with known paperclip rosters reveals no obvious matches. However, an annex to a 1951 Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, JIOA personnel list contains 6 redacted entries labeled retained under non-standard custody. The file has no further elaboration. The cargo's fate is equally opaque. One theory points to the Nevada Test and Training Range, where several post-war flight test reports make cryptic references to foreign delta planforms and compact propulsion assemblies of German derivation. These reports are classified to this day. An unsourced CIA history draft from the 1980s refers to the Atlantic air transfer incident as an example of compartmentalized relocation, implying that both passengers and equipment were removed from normal military oversight. The draft's margin bears a penciled note, CB2, confirm with maritime logs from Sandoval before release. Bremen's modern airport occupies the same ground where Courier Black Two began its final flight. A plaque commemorates the site's role in post-war airlifts, but there is no mention of the March 1947 disappearance. The only surviving trace in official U.S. files is a single, typewritten line in an ATC incident ledger, CB2, disposition complete, no further action. In January 1991, with Soviet forces withdrawing from East Prussia, scavengers combing the frozen countryside near the ruins of Königsberg stumbled upon the partially collapsed remains of a bunker complex. The site lay half-buried in the forested outskirts south of the Pregel River, its entrance choked with ice and debris. Among the scattered relics were rusted SS collar tabs, broken typewriters, and a charred map fragment bearing the handwritten title Eiswolf-Stellung. The term did not appear in any standard Wehrmacht or Waffen-SS operational records. Later analysis by German military historians suggested it referred to a contingency network for high-ranking Nazi officials to escape north via Baltic ports, eventually boarding icebreaker convoys into the Arctic. The fragment showed no conventional defensive lines, only a chain of coastal dots leading into the Norwegian Sea, annotated with cryptic notations such as FZ-12 and Lastlicht. Local accounts claim that within 48 hours of the discovery, a detachment of Russian military engineers arrived without explanation. Witnesses reported heavy equipment clearing debris from the bunker entrance, followed by sealed trucks departing under tarpaulin cover. The site was then bulldozed and buried beneath what would become a new section of the Kaliningrad highway bypass. Unofficially, the Russian Ministry of Defense archive contains a short entry dated February 3, 1991. Materials from Königsberg sector transferred to Archive Section 12B. Handle under Arctic Protocol. This Arctic Protocol designation appears in only 3 other known Soviet-era documents, all relating to polar navigation and submarine basing studies in the late 1940s. In 1997, a German researcher gained access to declassified fragments from the captured Nazi Sea Kriegsleitung, Naval Warfare Command, files. Among them was a 1944 memorandum from Admiral Karl Donitz's staff outlining winter operational corridors for Sondertransport, special transports, to an undisclosed northern destination. One attachment lists requisitions for reinforced hull plating and high-frequency radio gear designed for sub-zero environments. The name Eiswolf appears only once, next to a redacted code name. Metallurgical samples taken from the bunker's surviving wall sections revealed traces of an alloy unusual for wartime construction, a nickel-manganese steel blend with a crystalline structure suited for extreme cold. Such materials were rare in the Reich's late-war industry, which by 1945 faced severe shortages of specialty metals. Attempts to trace the map's FZ-12 notation have failed. Some naval historians speculate it could refer to Flottenzentrum 12, a rumored Kriegsmarine depot in northern Norway, possibly linked to the secret evacuation of scientific or political personnel in 1945. Others dismiss it as meaningless shorthand. Allied intelligence post-war reports mention scattered rumors of German icebreaker movements in the spring of 1945, including sightings of vessels without identification numbers moving under armed escort along the Norwegian coast. No official confirmation has ever surfaced. The Königsberg bunker discovery has since faded from public view. No museum exhibits display the artifacts, and the map fragment is said to be in private hands, having been quietly purchased from the scavengers by an unnamed Baltic collector. Today, motorists traveling the bypass drive unknowingly over what some believe was the nerve center of a last-ditch escape plan, one whose destination may have lain far beyond the Arctic Circle. The final line of the Russian archive note on the case reads simply, Eiswolf-Stellung, relocation confirmed, further details withheld. Some secrets do not fade, they wait. Buried in steel and ice, hidden in sealed archives, carried by those who will take them to unmarked graves. You can close the file, but the echo remains, in the maps with missing lines, the photographs with missing faces, and the roads that lead to doors you were never meant to find.